You know, I love to garden, and but I got to admit, by the summertime, by the end of the summer, I started getting pretty garden weary, just because of the heat and you know, trying to keep things alive. And you know, one of the things I found for me to be one of the most helpful things is to make sure I'm planting the right stuff in the right spots. I'll give you an example. This is VINCA, or otherwise known as periwinkles, and I've got two of those pots. This is right on my front driveway, and this is sitting on the concrete. I was sitting out here yesterday, and the concrete, I mean, it was over 100, it was probably 102, I think, outside, and the concrete was probably at least 110, 115 degrees. And those plants will withstand the heat. They love it. Just keep them a little bit good drained soil, and they thrive. You know, here's another behind me, is this moss rose, and I've got this little planter, and it sits against the brick wall, and this brick wall radiates a ton of heat. I mean, it gets late afternoon sun, beats on this thing, and this moss rose just thrives in it. So it's been great. These zinnias I planted for the first time this year, and on both sides, and they're just thriving also in the sun. So, you know, what I found is that if you plant, certain plants like shade, certain plants like a lot of sun, and that's probably the biggest key for me, is getting the right thing into the right spot. I want to show you this. I've got a Japanese maple over here. I just moved this morning to this new spot. It's getting a lot of morning sun, and hopefully here it's going to get some afternoon shade. I had it in a different spot, and you can see all these leaves are just dry and crispy. It was just getting way too much sun, even though I watered it every day. Okay, here's two more plants. This is mint and purple TRADESCANTIA, and both of these are pretty much unkillable, which is my kind of plant. I planted this mint a couple of years ago, and it was one small plant, and it has grown. It'll take over. So you got to be careful with mint, because it will take over your garden. So it may be good to put it in a container or in a space that's kind of contained, and you don't mind it growing. With a purple TRADESCANTIA, you can, you know, break these things off. You know, I trim them back all the time. You know, I can break that off. You can plant that in a cup of water, and in a week it's going to sprout roots. You can put it into a you know, a thing of dirt, and then replant it. So you can put it all over the yard, but it's the same way. It's going to take over, so you've got to be careful where you put it. Okay, here's another good example of finding the right spot for the right plant. These are CANNA lilies. I put these guys get full sun most of the day. It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. It hadn't gotten too hot back here yet, but I put, like, these were 3 small plants that I put in this space last year, and they're pretty much taking over. And the cool thing about those is you can separate them in the fall. This year when they die back, I'm going to separate those and plant some more in other places around the yard. Here's another example. These are hydrangeas that I put in, and I thought they were going to get a lot more shade, because I've got all these crepe myrtles in my backyard. I've got a big, there's the sun, I've got a big live oak over here. And so I thought this was going to do well, because they like dappled sunlight. But unfortunately, when the sun sets in the west over on that side, boy, it just comes down and it beats these guys up. So this is going to get real wilty in the afternoon, and it's just not getting, you know, enough shade, and so it doesn't bloom as much either. So I don't get all the flowers that I'd like to get on it. I think this is pretty interesting, because I've got behind me is this big live oak that's in my backyard, and so I know it needed some shade plants underneath it. I wanted to fill out, and I hadn't planted anything in there for years, and so I really wanted to kind of make it lush and green. So I put a couple of plants I thought would get big. This is there's a fern over here, and that fern is doing great. It's getting a lot of good shade on that one side, but on the other side of this oak, it's funny, I planted this ACANTHUS back here, and it's kind of struggling a little bit. It's kind of yellowy on the leaves, and it gets wilty in the afternoon, because this spot right here, kind of coming right down along this fence line and then back into this corner gets a ton of afternoon sun, and it's just too much for that acanthus. So I probably may end up having to move that, but I thought that was kind of interesting, like just depending on what side of the tree it was on, really depending on how well it grew or didn't grow. So anyway, that's my biggest advice. I'm an amateur gardener. I kill a lot of stuff. My thumb is more, kind of olive green, olive drab than bright green. But the good thing is, you can try something one season, you see how it does, and if it doesn't work, you plant it somewhere else. And a lot of perennials I can dig up and transplant when they go dormant in the fall and the winter. So anyway, we'll probably be trying some new places for some of these just to make sure they thrive. If you got any good tips or recommendations or plants that you love that do great in the sun or the shade, let me know, because I'm always looking for good advice. Okay, one more. I just couldn't resist. Sorry, this will be the last one, I promise. But this is the proven grand champion winner of all time. This is purple oxalis. And it's real delicate. Comes up these little pink flowers that'll bloom a little more later on. In the summertime, it doesn't like a ton of direct heat. It needs to be, shaded a little more, some shade or dappled sun in that direct summer heat. But once it cools down a little bit, we get to fall, and especially in the spring, this thing will just come out, and it's so beautiful. The purple and the flowers are so delicate. This, what I wanted to point out is this guy has been in this crappy old pot forever. I planted this in 2005, I think. So that plant is, close to 20 years old. And we had moved one summer, it was the summer of 2006, and that plant went in that pot in a moving truck in the summertime in the back of a 18-wheeler across state lines. It didn't get watered for months. I mean, it was just hard as a brick, the soil. But when I brought it back, we moved back to Texas, and I watered it again, like in the spring. Boom, here it comes. And it just comes back year after year after year. It is so hardy, you can't go wrong with it. You can plant it in full sun, in the shade. It'll do pretty well pretty much anywhere. But like I said, in the bright, hot summer, it's going to want a little more dappled shade. So just one more example of, put a plant where it can thrive. So good luck.